Thanks, Sydney. Thanks, everybody, for coming. It's really great to see everybody here. Festivals and legacy. Wow. Okay. This change? Yeah, great. Okay, so this talk grows out of an experience that I had a couple years ago. So my family lives all over the country, and we don't get together very much, and we're not one for family trips. But as we've gotten older, I've tried to be like, hey, guys, let's get together. And so one year, my uncle was like, let's go to this place. Let's all gather from around the country and go to this place. I've been a couple times. It's called the Chautauqua Institution. And so I went with my family to this place. It is a 10-week arts and cultural festival that's been held in the same spot in this town called Chautauqua, New York. They have lectures, they have an on-site opera and symphony and ballet company, they have theater and art, and they also have like summer camp stuff, canoeing and pottery and things like that. But not only that, it's been there for 150 years. And I'm walking around this place my first year, and there's no litter anywhere. There's 100,000 people there. There's no trash cans visible. There's no anti-littering campaign. There's no litter. There's no security. There's just teenagers in yellow shirts driving around in golf carts going, hey. And I couldn't quite understand how a place like this could work. And it was in I think my fourth evening there. I was sitting on this bench. I was watching the sun go down. It's getting dark. There's fireflies coming up. I'm watching this beautiful lake. There's no one around. It's silent. And I see coming down, I'm like on this path, there's this little girl, maybe 6 years old, on a bicycle that's a little wobbly, but she's on her bike. She's biking down. I'm watching her from way far away. There's no one anywhere. And this little girl just bikes all the way past me and back into the darkness, totally confident in where she's going and what she's doing. And I was like, how do you make a place like this? How does a place like this really exist? Not bespoiled by all of the things that I know of in my America, right? Like, how is this a real thing? And so I started to dig. I started to ask people questions. I started to talk to people a lot. I started going, they have an on-site archive and an on-site historian. I started to dig into what made this place what it was. And that led me to teach a class there. I taught a class last year, which turned into this talk. I've been invited to give this talk at the Chautauqua Institution at the end of the month. And I thought it would be good to share some of the insights that I've been learning about different organizations and how they get to be what they are with my own community. I've been throwing events in this town for 30 years. And I know a lot of you from events that I've thrown or been involved in or events that you have thrown. And I think it's nice to kind of start to share some of these insights as a community that's starting to age and become more institution-minded about what we can learn. Okay, so who am I? I am the artistic director of On Beyond. I'm also an artist and a storyteller. I make art like this that's interactive. I make art like this that's immersive. I make art like this that's environmental. I make art that's theatrical. I also make art out of garbage. I do a lot of stuff. I also, something to bring up for me is I'm the founder of the Athletic Playground Kids Program. The Athletic Playground is a fitness and community center in Emeryville. In 2012, I founded the kids program there that's now run by Walker, who's another company member of ours. And we've processed more than 10,000 children in the history of that program. I just looked it up the other day. We're now at the point where we have a coach there in our program he's an adult, who was coached by a kid who was our student when he was a kid, who grew up to be a coach for us, who coached this kid who's now grown up to be a coach for us. So this is my own sort of experience with long-term culture that I just think that brings my interest to this sort of thing. Okay, what are we talking about? We are talking about events that have lasted greater than 50 years. We're looking at events that have been in the same place that whole time. We're looking at events that have happened at the regular cadence, that are this repeatable, anticipatable time of the year, and that has a continuous population, right? The same group of people, year after year, have been coming, and they've passed it on, to their children and their families. There's some things that I'm bracketing here that I'm not going to get to today. We're not going to talk about major religious festivals. That's a little outside my purview and starts to become a different thing when you become a world religion. Although some of these events that are very old are religious adjacent, because when things used to be in the past, they were very religious. We're not talking about sporting events with year-round leagues. We'll talk about why a little bit, but that's kind of, again, the sports culture is a little different. And we're not talking about culture events that just move around every year. There's a number of events that are itinerant, and those have kind of a different quality. Okay, the format. I'm not going to talk for 90 minutes. I'm going to talk for 55 minutes. If you need to go to the bathroom, you can get up and go to the bathroom. If you need to go get a drink, you can go to get a drink. I know it's a little bit long. At the end of that talk, I'm going to invite the incredible Kaizo Naka up to ask a few questions. about and like lead a discussion, and then we'll be taking questions from the audience, from you guys, for a little while, and then there'll be some time to just hang out and discuss informally. Please hold your questions to the end. I've got a lot to say, and I don't want to stand here forever and say it, so like I'll give you time to ask whatever you want. Okay, disclaimer. I am a storyteller, not a historian, right? I am a person who, I make art. I make art that makes people think about things the way I think about things, that makes people feel the things that I feel. And that's my intent here. My list is not exhaustive. I only have an hour. I'm only going to talk about a few events, 3 or 4 events. There's a bunch of events that qualify that aren't on my list that I'm not going to talk about. And there's also stuff that I've left out for brevity. And I also will admit to occasionally making sweeping generalizations about things for making them more fun. The main thing here is like I'm not like an expert. I'm not an academic. I'm a person with an active mind and a library card and the internet, right? And so this is not meant to like be the end of this discussion. This is actually meant to be the beginning of this discussion. I want to kick this off in my community of having people work on this with me to be like, what does it mean to get our events over this 10, 15-year hump? And is that even like important? One more thing here is like, this is all a little bit part of an oral tradition, right? A lot of active cultures need to have a strong oral tradition, and we'll be talking about oral tradition through these events, but this, I hope to become part of our oral tradition, right? Like our Bay Area event community that starts to be like, well, you know, events have happened this way in the past, and I heard about this thing one time, and one year I threw the party. Like, we should be sharing this information more actively, because in that way we learn from each other, and we get a little bit more done as a community than we would alone. All right. Let's look at some summary stuff. So these are some common themes and qualities that you're going to see throughout a bunch of these. Is that better for you guys? Yeah. No, I see you. So oral tradition, origin stories, and folklore. You're going to see in a lot of these examples, people have a strong sense of who we are because of the history and the stories that we tell about why we do this event here and what has happened. Values. So I'm going to talk a little bit about explicit and implicit values. Here's what I'll say briefly. Explicit values are the ones that you wrote down. They're the ones that you say. They're your 10 principles, your 4 pillars, your 10 commandments, whatever those are. Those are the explicit, like I said them. The implicit values are the ones that you do. That if you look around your community, you see people performing actions with their bodies that embody those values, right? So like an example I sometimes use is like, you could be like, we help other people, but if you look around seeing people help people across the street, you don't have to have anyone tell you that's a value. You can just see it because people are doing it with their bodies. Regular cadence, dependable location. A lot of these things, in order to last this many years, need to become tradition, and in order to become tradition, they need to be something that people depend on, right? They plan their year around it. Oh, I can't go in September, I'm going to Burning Man. You know what I mean? That feeling of being like, oh, we have to keep going because this is something that we locus our entire logistics of our year around, that's a big part of it. In-grouping and out-grouping. So anytime we decide that we are a group of people, that means we've decided that some other group of people is not us. This is often expressed negatively in sociological terms, but I think for events, there's something about having an in-group and an out-group that's really essential. Why would we be doing things off here over on the side by ourselves if it was just like everything else, right? We are automatically excluding ourselves in a positive way to define ourselves, but we'll also start to see nesting of further and further in-groups inside of the in-groups, right? People love to have in-groups and out-groups. Conservatism and progressivism. So I don't mean these politically so much. These are 2 terms I'm going to use to be like very specific philosophical stances. Conservatism is the idea that the best it was in the past. And the more that we can stay close to the past and stay with the traditions of the past, the more we will be able to stay true to the quality of the thing. And progressivism is this idea that the best to come is actually in the future, that we can do a better job and that we should be embracing the changes that we need to make to bring ourselves into that more ideal future. And there's a tension between these 2 qualities that you're going to see come up a lot in these events as a real driving engine of how these events sustain. And the last one is this thing I'm calling, I came up with this yesterday, founders, saviors, and scapegoats. I'm also calling it saviors, scapegoats, and saints. You're going to see, we're going to talk about this more in the examples, but these cycles of bringing people in to save the organization, but in order to do that, they have to do things that are unpopular. And so those people also get cycled out. And we'll talk about the drama that ensues as people go through this cycle. Okay, a few questions to just ask yourself. I'll come back to these at the end, but I just want to like put them into your mind so that you're thinking about these things. What are our values and how do we enact our values? How do we make space for both tradition and progress? Where does the money come from? Who is in charge and who is this for? Do we need growth to sustain, and what are the trade-offs? And who are we and who isn't us? We'll talk more about these, but first, let's talk about some examples. All right, our first example, this is Kırkpınar. This is an oil wrestling festival in Turkey. Yeah, oh my God. I didn't originally have slides for this talk, and in an early version, someone's like, visuals would be good. So the slides are mostly going to be pictures, you guys. They're mostly just for flavor. You've been through most of the words now already. Mostly it's just going to be funny. So, okay, Kırkpınar is an oil wrestling festival in Turkey where 2,000 men congregate to compete to be the chief wrestler every year. They douse themselves in olive oil. They wear these special pants called the kispits. And the goal of the match is to pin your opponent's back to the ground, force him to sit, pull down his pants, or carry him 3 steps without him touching the ground. The proper technique for doing this is, here's a bunch of these guys. The proper technique for doing this is you actually have to thrust your hand down the pants of the other wrestler and grab him by the, quote, upper inner thigh. It's how it's supposed to be. So this has been going since the year 1360. So Sultan Suleiman was crossing the Bosphorus with a big army, and depending on which account you read, the army was always fighting. Were they always training, or were they always fighting? I don't know. It was a million years ago, you guys. But they wrestled, and one time they stopped at this spot, and these 2 guys wrestled for so long, they wrestled all through the night, and all through the day, and all through the night, and they both dropped dead on the spot on the following dawn. And a spring sprung up on the place where they had died. And so the people of the army were like, well, that's magical. We should build a city here. We'll call that city 40 Springs, or Kırkpınar. And we will hold a wrestling competition on this spot every year from then on. And that's what they've done for the last 600 years. So when they do this, there's a big parade, right? When they all gather, there's a huge parade, and everybody goes and parades down, and all 2,000 guys, they parade past these statues. They've erected statues of all the past champions for the past 600 years. And you go past them, you go into the thing, you get anointed with olive oil. There's a lot of praying and chanting and song. And then there's this sort of this ritual auction that happens. See, the festival is very expensive, as you might imagine. Oh, let's go to the next picture. The festival is very expensive, as you might imagine. It costs a lot of money to do it, and there are ticket sales, but they don't spoiler, ticket sales don't cover the cost of anything. I don't know, everyone knows that, right? Ticket sales do not cover the cost. It just doesn't, that's a whole nother lecture I should give. But so it doesn't cover the cost in this case, so they have this sort of charity auction where they auction off this sacred piece of livestock, and the person who buys it is the person who is not only volunteering to donate all this money, they've donated the most money to this year's festival, but they then host the next year's festival. Right? And so you see there's this sort of cycle of charity in terms of this thing. It's like, oh, you have to both be solvent enough to throw it, and then you have to be generous enough to be like, no, I'm going to give away my money just to throw the thing for the community, knowing that next year, when I've spent all the money, those other rich people will come and bid on this thing as well. And so everybody sort of is passing that money around for a while. They also have an interesting ritual when they lose. They point at the other guy and they go, see you next year, which is an interesting, talk about a way to sort of enact our values, right? This is not connected to a World Turkish Oil Wrestling Federation or anything. There are more solid Turkish Oil Wrestling Federations, but this is not that one. But these guys are just here for the love of the culture and the love of the game and the love of the tradition. And I like to start this one because I think it reminds us how simple some of these things can be. Oh wait, yes, this one. This one's so good. This picture's everything. It reminds me in certain ways how much, what are sort of our main qualities, right? So we have some of the things that we've already talked about here. We have a solid origin story, right? The 2 guys wrestled and they died and the spring sprung up. We have the same location for 600 years, right? They've always been there. You can always come back. You know exactly where it's going to be. They've been doing the same parades. They've even been sort of instantiating those traditions through the statues, right? And you can look back and you can see every champion that's won. The guy who's in the champion right now has been the champion for the last 10 years. He's 61 years old. So, which is awesome, right? It's a wrestling match where a 60-year-old has been the champion, and the interview with him he's so generous, he's so nice, he talks so nicely about the other guys in the competition, like they're all brothers. It's really cute. You also see those implicit values, like I was saying, in how they cycle the money through and things like that. It's oh, you can see that this is not set up to be a profit maker, right? Like the actual performance of the event shows that everybody has to share in that labor. And then, of course, where does the money come from, which is going to be a common theme, right? Because when we acknowledge as a group that the money never comes from the ticket sales, like some of the money does, but it doesn't matter how many you sell, there's always this gap that you have to close, and that gap is going to be a really big part of the story of all of these events as we go through them. Okay, next example. So this is the Oberammergau Passion Play, established in 1633, coming up on its 400th anniversary. These are all people in the play. So the Oberammergau is a small town in Bavaria, Germany. In 1633, the bubonic plague came to the village, and half the village was killed. And so the people of the village got together, who remained, and they sat down in the town square, and they got on their knees, and they prayed, and they said, "Oh God, if you save us, we will do a play in honor of your son every 10 years forever." And no one else died in the town after that. And so off they went to have to do a passion play in honor of the life and death of Jesus Christ forever. I was telling this story to Walker, and they were like, "Oh my God, it's like if you swore to God that you would do a punk show every year forever, and now it's 500 years later, and like punk music's not a thing anymore," which I think is a good, it's a good analogy. So they did not invent the passion play. The passion play in the 1600s was like becoming this really popular form of religious theater, and they were like, "Yeah, we'll do a passion play." But because of that popularity and the story around their origin, it became immediately very popular, and they didn't have room in the town. So it's this tiny town. It's about 5,000 people in this town, and so many people are in the play. I would say 3,000 people are in the play in some way, performing music or on stage or handling the livestock or directing, doing the production, and the rest of the town is committed to the industry of doing the play. So it immediately gets popular. They have to start holding it outside in the graveyard right away. And it also immediately starts losing money. Like it loses money. They lose money. Let's see. In this third one, they lose 45 guilders, and then at their 100th year anniversary, they lose 84 guilders. And it's just like they're selling 11,000, 14,000 tickets, and they're still running in debt, right? The money is never going to come from the tickets. And so they start collaborating a little bit with the German government. Right? Someone needs to pay for this. This has become an institution. Already it's a century old. And so the German government starts supporting it as this piece of like cultural artifact that, often governments do. I'm going to scan through a little bit of its long history in a moment, because like there's a lot of stuff that happens over those hundreds of years. But like it's interesting to remember that every festival has its like moments of hardship that we can all tell stories about. So I like this one. So there was in the 1770, the government banned all religious plays. And so then Oberammergau spent the next 10 years bribing and politicking and sending ambassadors to the capital so that the next one, they were the only place that had an exemption for that. And so they were the only religious play in Germany. And you can't, like, imagine the politicking of like, oh, we know we need permits, right? But it's like, oh, you have a decade to get the only permit in all of Germany. In 1800, the French invaded during the show and interrupted the show, and then the Austrians came and fought off the French from the town, and then they did a special production for the Austrian army for defending the town. That's so cool. 1850, they had no money to pay everyone. They did the whole play, and then they were like, sorry, nobody gets paid this year. And everyone's like, really? It's the biggest industry of the town. They're like, sorry, no money. And so it almost sank the town that year. They get more and more popular, right? They get written up in magazines. In 1840, they get written up in English. They're now selling 35,000 tickets per year, right? Again, town of 5,000 people. It's only in year 220 that they first show a profit. I share this because it's important when we are all trying to make profit on our events that we have empathy for ourselves. Like these people have been doing it as long as it could be done. 1880, they're selling 100,000 tickets a year, and they finally, in the year 1900, year 260, build a theater. Right? And I think this is like a good point to start to highlight some of these themes, right? People are very averse to change, right? People are very averse to change, and something that happens that comes up a lot, right, is this idea. It's like, hey, we've been doing this for 200 years. In that time, governments have come and gone, economies have come and gone, certain religious practices and faiths have come and gone, but the thing that has remained the same is this play and the way that we do it. And so you start to see this like conservatism creep in, right? The idea that's like, hey, what makes this what it is that we don't change it. And so anytime we're changing it, we're traveling further from the kernel of the thing that it should be, and that's to be avoided. And that kind of fuels the next, 50 years of Oberammergau and the play. This is a good one. So by the turn of the century, they're hosting major politicians, right? They're one of the major theater events in the world. Taft goes there, Richard Strauss, King Gustav of Sweden, lots of people go there. And in 1900, this is interesting, so a rabbi comes to Oberammergau and he writes up a big review. And a lot of stuff starts to come out about the town. So the town is sort of in like perpetual cosplay of biblical times. They all dress like their characters. They all speak like their characters from the Bible. They venerate each other according to their role in the play. So the guy who plays Jesus is like treated like a god all decade. Like people, give him stuff and things, and no one wants to hang out with the guy who plays Judas. The interview with him is really interesting. He's like, yeah, it's ruining my life. Like no one wants to come over. The positions are largely hereditary. So his dad was also Judas. And the rabbi's like, would you have your son play Judas? And the guy was like, absolutely not. This is ruining our life. Like, we would leave, but where would we go? This is where we've been for hundreds of years. And so you see this weird like entrenchment, right? This super commitment to the bit, as it were, that like... So another thing that comes out with the rabbi's review, which is very widely distributed, is how anti-Semitic the play is. I mean, it's 1630. It's a 1630 German Christian play about the death of Jesus. It's very anti-Semitic. We're talking Jews have devil horns on their hats, anti-Semitic. Like, it's right out there. And the rabbi... I'll link you guys to the review that he writes. I would highly recommend the read. It's hilarious. But he's like, people keep asking me what I thought of the play. He doesn't give a detailed answer to anyone who lives in the town. But the word is out, and people are the international community is starting to notice what's happening in Oberammergau. But it's Germany. And so 1930 comes, and we all know what's happening in Germany in 1930, the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. And so in 1934, it's the 300th anniversary of Oberammergau's Passion Play, and they do a special presentation for Hitler and his Reich. And it is like, they like add extra anti-Semitism just for him, you know what I mean? They really do it up. And this is all like, they think they're doing a good job, right? They're German, they're a very traditional town, they're a very traditional piece of offering, and spoiler, Hitler loses the war, right? And so suddenly the attitudes in Germany towards anti-Semitism from 1930 to 1940 to 1950 shift dramatically. And the requirements of the play start to change. By the 1950s, people know about Oberammergau, and the international Jewish community is starting to call for its cancellation. Leonard Bernstein and Arthur Miller both like signed petitions, like these big prominent American theater Jews signed these petitions to try to get it canceled. And they petitioned the German government to try to get rid of it. And there's starting to be a lot of pressure on the town. Over the 60s and 70s, there starts to be this interesting thing. The German government is starting to pull back funding because they're trying to sort of not be seen as the inheritors of the racist tradition of the Nazi government. So they're trying to figure out how to not be involved anymore. And then over the course of the 60s and the 70s, the town itself starts to draw away from the play. So what's happened is, as we know, like generally things are run by people who have been there longer. And in Oberammergau, the play is run by the town council, and the town council in the 50s through the 80s are all people who were born in pre-World War II Germany, right? So there's all these older people who are running the town council who are deciding on the content of the play, and they do not want it to be changed. Tradition is everything. But the younger people who were born in the 60s and the 70s, they're born in post-World War II Germany, and they have a whole different set of beliefs around, a lot of values, right? They have a lot of different feelings about what should and should not be in the play. And so the young people of the town, and not even like the young people, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, stop wanting to be in the play. So they're losing money. The international community is starting to stop coming as much. The German government is not supporting it, and the people don't want to be in the play anymore, and it starts to be this like really brutal tension inside the town. And so it's unclear what's going to happen, but time is funny. So the positions in Oberammergau are largely hereditary, right? And over time, people die. And so in 1984, the director dies suddenly, and I don't know exactly how the process happens so that they're passed down, but the new director is decided to be this guy Christian Stuckel, who is 26 years old in 1984. And the town council is not thrilled about young Christian Stuckel and his idea to change it. Already some changes have been creeping in the last 20 years. They finally allowed the show to not be in Latin anymore. You know, like really minor stuff that you're like, wow, you guys, it's really crazy. So Christian Stuckel comes in, he's like, I'm gonna change a lot of stuff. And the town council is like, no, you're not. And there's a huge fight in preparation for the 1990 play. But what happens, so the town council is trying to get him fired. They're trying to get enough votes together and get a referendum to get him out of there. But 2 members of the town council die before they are able to hold the vote. And Christian Stuckel is waved through to direct the 1990 performance. And he does, and he makes some sweeping changes. He starts working with the Anti-Defamation League to start changing the text a little bit. He allows married women and women over 35 to perform, which is a big hit in the town. There's also a thing that's happening, so they're under, so the previous director who died, he had made some of the changes to the play and the text, and his wife, his estate, is suing the town of Oberammergau because they're using his play without their intellectual property rights. But what she's really doing is trying to get them to stop throwing the anti-Semitic play. That's what she's really doing. She's not really there about the IP. She's just, I know I can hold this over you guys to try to leverage you. So the town is being sued, but Christian Stuckel goes to her and he talks it out and he gets the lawsuit dropped. So in this moment, he's really done a lot of change, and the citizens of the town are largely psyched about it. They're like, oh my God, this young guy has made some of the changes that we want. Let's keep going. But the town council hates him, right? You start to see this cycle again of like this guy who comes in to make the necessary changes, but some elements don't appreciate that. And so the town council tries to get rid of him again for the 2000 production. And they have a decade to do it. So they try to get the votes together and things like that. And they lose. The citizens of the town hold their own referendum against the town council and vote him through. And he's incredibly popular. He starts allowing the Muslim people in the town to perform. And of course, those people love it. And he starts getting more and more people from all over the world to consult on the content of the play. And the international community starts to come back. You start to see the ticket sales rise again, and he sails right into year 2010, doing even more changes. He puts a roof over the stage. People hate it. The town hates it. They're like, oh, my great-grandmother used to do it in the rain, but only after she was married. He puts in evening shows, and they start to see the revenue come back, right? And so this is a really interesting things that happen. So in 2022, the Cambridge, these academics from Cambridge go and they do this big ethnography about the changes that have been happening in Oberammergau to the play. And they find this really interesting phenomenon, right? There's always going to be this tension, right? There's these people who are like, it's 200-300 years old. Don't change it. It's a sacred artifact. And then there's these people who are young and they're like, it needs to be changed or no one's gonna come here anymore. It will become a dead artifact. It will become a museum piece rather than a live piece of culture. And this argument has been tearing the town apart. But over the 30, 40 years of Christian Stuckel being in charge and making these changes, something has started to shift, right? Because the changes are very well received. Most of the town likes it, the audience likes it, the money likes it, right? So everybody's like, oh, this is good. But a couple things have happened in the wake of this understanding. Number one, now the argument in the town has shifted from do we change it or not to, well, we've got to change it, what do we change? And this has led to something really interesting in the town. It has gone from argument to discussion, right? It has gone from this feud about this dead ritual that does not effectively enact the values of the town to this ongoing discussion between the older and younger generations about what is valuable in the play and what is not valuable in the play and what can we change that stays true to the values and what not. And they've re-enlivened this thing. This piece of culture has become now a source of solidarity again, where it was once a source of division. But the other thing that's happened is when they interview the sort of conservative people in the town about the changes that have been in the play, even when they like survey them and they find that these people really like the changes and are really positive, when they survey them about Christian Stuckel, they hate that guy. They hate that guy. They think he's everything wrong with the play. And they're like, well, you know, what about this thing? They're like, well, I do like that change that he made. And they're like, well, what about he took out this song? And they're like, well, you know, my grandson really likes it that way. And they're like, okay. But what about that guy? They're like, I hate that guy. That guy's going to ruin the town. And so this is, I think, a strong example of what I call the savior, scapegoat, saint kind of cycle, right? Where it's like, oh, he's got to make the changes in order to save the thing, but he has to alienate certain people in order to make those changes, even when those changes are sort of irrefutably positive. I love this photo. Look at how many people are in this shot. All of these white things are people in robes singing. And then this is one of those live friezes. It's like one of those live pieces of art with people in costumes standing very, very still and enacting a scene of the Bible. So the play now is huge. 500,000 people go every year to a town of 5,000. We are trying to go in 2030. If anybody wants in on going to Oberammergau, Lily, I see you. Come with us. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy. I'm going to need to brush up on my German. But it's, what I'll say, so I got a couple more pictures here. Oh yeah, this is my everybody yelling picture. Look at this guy. Okay, so let's remember a couple of our themes here before we move on, right? We have our origin story about the bubonic plague, and we swore to God that we would do it, so we cannot stop. Right? What a mandate for keep throwing your party. God said, that was the theme 2 months ago. Steady location. It's been in the same town. They can't move it. It's the town. If they moved it, it would no longer be the Oberammergau Passion Play. Explicit and implicit values are really interesting, right? Because like you have the explicit values of the text of the play itself, and then the implicit values of the town, the people who are actually in the town. And so what you see as part of the conflict here is that the explicit values of the text do not match the values of the people who live there. And so the people who live there are like, I am not going to enact this ritual. This ritual represents values that I am antithetical to. And so you start to see that ritual die, right? That's what happens is people start being like, that's not for me. That represents something that has nothing to do with me. And so you kind of, that tension, I think, has been what has fueled part of the decay that they are now coming out of. Savior, scapegoat, saint. Christian Stuckel's right moving from savior to scapegoat, right? Like he is still on his way towards making everything better and better, but you can already see that there's still a huge attribution error about whatever's wrong is his fault. And eventually the pendulum will swing too far in changes and they'll start to swing it back. And then of course conservatism and progressivism, right? I sympathize with the older people of Oberammergau who are like, hey, governments come and go, but the play remains the same. I sympathize with that perspective. I don't want to throw away old things just because they're old. Sometimes they know things and have technology in them that we don't understand. And at the same time, like, I think everyone in this room can understand that values and the way we express those values have changed dramatically in the past 300 years, and you can't just keep doing things the same way forever. Okay, let's talk about the Chautauqua Institution. From 1874, 151 years, it is an East Coast paradise. Okay, a little bit about Chautauqua. So in 1874, these two guys had an idea. So public school, this is just after the Civil War, right? And public school was still not really like a thing. It had just been started, but it was poorly organized, and most education that was formal was happening in Sunday schools. And Sunday schools were not regulated in any particular way. Like people could start them and they could teach kids, but there was no like association of Sunday school teachers. But they had a bit of a newsletter that they were sending around. And the guy who ran that newsletter, John Vincent, John Vincent had this idea. He was like, what if I brought together all of the Sunday school teachers from all the different denominations to get together and talk about teaching? Right? Like this idea that like there might be skills for how to organize your classroom and how to teach good lessons and how to keep kids paying attention and things like that. And that goes beyond just what kind of Christian you are. So I'm going to call all the different Christian denominations here. And so he went to his friend Lewis Miller with this idea, and Lewis Miller thought this was a great idea. So they started throwing the Chautauqua Assembly. That first year, it was just like this little bitty thing. Lewis Miller was on the board of the Chautauqua Lake and Parks Recreation Council. And so he was like, there's this piece of land that I think we can do it on pretty cheap. And so they went and threw it. And it was very successful. And they actually managed to buy the land the next year for $1. Here's a tip. Have a politician in your founder's set. So Miller was a really wealthy guy. He owned one of the first patents for the combine harvester. And he made his fortune in industrial farming equipment. He had a guy work for him as his local sales rep for a while by the name of Henry Ford. That guy obviously went on to make a fair bit of money himself. And there's actually a number of wealthy people who show up very early in the Chautauqua history who are really critical. Studebaker goes there, Heinz goes there, of ketchup fame, and Thomas Edison. So Thomas Edison married Lewis Miller's daughter, and as a consequence, he had to go to Chautauqua every year for the summer, and he hated it there. Edison is kind of a city boy, right? He's not like a woods guy. And this is the woods in the 1870s. Like, people are camping on like wooden platforms with canvas tents and like cooking stuff over open flames on little stuff. And so Edison comes there with a couple of his buddies, and he builds the world's first electrified hotel on the grounds of the Chautauqua Lake Society. See, I have a picture here somewhere. Yeah, here it is. This is the Athenaeum Hotel. It is the first hotel in the world with electricity in it. It is still there today. You can stay in it. It is old. So he brings electricity to Chautauqua, which to me is like the most Wi-Fi on the playa coded accomplishment. Something to understand about Western New York in the 1870s is Western New York in the 1870s is like the Bay Area in the 2000s, 2010s, right? It's like the edge of civilized culture where all these new technologies and fortunes and religions and spiritual beliefs are being made, and anything can happen. And so you see, I actually think that there's a lot of parallels here with Chautauqua for people who are interested in Burning Man. There's a lot to learn here. Okay, so they buy the land for $1, and for the first 15 years, Lewis Miller and his buddies are essentially funding it. They're putting their own money in. They're having a great time, right? It's a party. They go out there, they stay for a couple weeks. The men are going back to the city for business and coming out on the weekends. And in the meantime, a bunch of cultural institutions are being established, including the women's temperance movement. Like, the original thing is founded at Chautauqua, and the Chautauqua Women's Society is co-founded by Eleanor Roosevelt. Super hot. Okay, so Miller stays in charge for 25 years. And at a certain point, he's forced to step down because he's getting old, but he understands that his money has really been fueling the thing the whole time, and so he reorganizes his money and creates the actual what's known as Chautauqua Institution, which is what it is now. He puts some of his money into it, and they make a bell tower in honor of him, and then he dies a couple years later. And the next guy comes on, whose name is Bester. And I think there's a nice cycle here when we're talking about saviors, scapegoats, and saints that we're going to see with Bester and Hazlitt to come after him. So Bester is well regarded now. They've named the Center Plaza off of him. He established a bunch of things about Chautauqua that are considered staples, like the opera and the symphony. George Gershwin came and wrote a symphony out there that really put them on the map. He made the Opera Hall. And also he presided while FDR came to Chautauqua, and he gives this famous speech called the I Hate War speech. And it's broadcast over the radio, and everybody in the country hears it, and suddenly there's a ton of focus on Chautauqua. And at the exact same time, he runs the entire thing into bankruptcy. 1933, everything is going out of business, and this is no exception. They have no money, and they end up $800,000 in debt in 1933, which is $20 million in today's money. They are done, right? They have no way to do it. And so in this moment, this next guy steps up, which is Sam Hazlitt, right? So Bester has been president, and he has been increasing the credibility of the institution, but the financial stability of it is in dire straits. And so this guy Hazlitt comes in. Hazlitt is he's like a steel businessman from Pittsburgh. He made all his money in metals, and he's got a bunch of steel buddies who come to Chautauqua at this point in its history. And he organizes his buddies, and they start a new business called the Chautauqua Reorganization Fund. And what they do is they put a bunch of money in it, and they buy all of the Chautauqua debt. They buy all $800,000 of that debt. So now Chautauqua is only in debt to this one organization that has been created for their benefit. And then Hazlitt starts to fundraise hard. And he does a couple things that I think are really important. So one of them, he does this new kind of fundraiser where he goes through the general membership, and he starts getting people to put in money to sponsor individual parts of the event. Not just like this show, but like this bench, or this tree, or this brick in the walk. He starts this tradition in America of being like, you can put your name on it even if you're just like a little donor. You know what I mean? And that has obviously been such a successful strategy that we see it all over now. But this was one of the things they did to save the Chautauqua Institution. The other thing they did, which I think is just as interesting, so all of this time, people come there annually, right? And they're mostly camping, but a lot of these people are wealthy, and so they've built some permanent infrastructure there. They've built houses. They've built kind of nice houses. And those houses sit on the land, and they lease that land from the Chautauqua Institution, and they pay money, and that's part of how Chautauqua makes it work. But Chautauqua needs money now. They need capital now. And so they make this interesting trade-off, and they sell those leases to the people holding those leases so that they become property owners, right? They trade capital for power in this moment, and it definitely changes the dynamic of the Chautauqua institution forever. Because suddenly these people go from attendees, right, patrons, to being like, this is ours now, we own it. And you can feel that still in the feelings of people who own property there. So Bester resigns, bankruptcy is hard, and Hazlitt in this moment steps in and he reorganizes the company, having successfully saved the entire institution, into the Chautauqua Endowment Fund. An endowment fund is how rich people institutionalize their money to carry out their values after they are dead, right? That's what an endowment is. Rich people are like, hey, I want this to go on forever. And I won't be around forever, so I'm going to imbue this chunk of money with a legal obligation to ensure that goes on forever. And so this is what the Chautauqua Endowment does. The Chautauqua Endowment takes the money, that is the initial seed money from this 1930s saving event, and they've invested that money. And what they do is whatever profit is made off that money, they donate to the Chautauqua institution. And this has gone so well that they now donate more than $2 million to the main institution for operating funds every year. And the party doesn't do anything for that money. Right? They just are there. And there's another entirely separate business that has a totally separate fundraising model that they collect money, they invest that money, and their job is to make that money grow so that the profit can go to the festival. And this is what an endowment is. And I think this is like a critical learning in terms of people who are hoping to have their event go on and on, right? Because at a certain point, at the beginning, the rich guys are always fueling it. Right? The tickets don't make the money. The money has to come from somewhere, right? So at a certain point, the rich guys are putting the money in, and at a certain point, they have to bail it out. And if they do that enough times, they get tired of bailing it out every time, and they start to want there to be a system for that. And so they end up endowing their money so that it can be there. So Hazlitt becomes the president of the fund, and then after that, he becomes president of the university. People love him, but it's still a money problem. And so he keeps having to make policy changes, and eventually he decides to make a policy change to allow Jews to buy property on the grounds in the 1950s. And that, once again, saves the institution financially, but is vastly unpopular, and he is ousted soon after. And so you see, right, this cycle of like someone has to come in to do what needs to be done, but that's always going to be alienating to some of the people who are already in power. And so eventually that person is going to be scapegoated for the things that they did and be ousted. But what I've seen also is both Hazlitt and Bester before him, now when they look at them, these guys are saints. These guys saved the institution. Their names are on buildings and on the square and stuff like that. They're really, like, they're considered the guys who have made the institution what it is. One more example here from the modern world. Oh, this is an old one. I love the postcards there. So going to Chautauqua was kind of crazy. It's a little bit like being in the best world exploring video game ever. Everything is real. You can go into any building. Every picture you take off the wall is of that place from like 100 years before. They have their own newspaper that's all archived in their on-site archive. So you can like go through the newspapers from 200 years ago and read the stories of what happened. Every person has like vast arrays of lore that they can share with you. But they've still got a tough spot, right? So I'm going to talk about the most recent president briefly, Michael Hill. So in 2016, the board of directors looks at their financial model and realizes they have a problem. The average age at Chautauqua trends to be about 65, 70, right? It's a heavy boomer population. And although they're doing well with their fundraising within that population, they're looking and like they have more boomers and not a lot of millennials. And the boomers have a lot more money than the millennials do, don't we know it? And so they are starting to look at their financial models and they're like, oh, they're concerned that in 40 years they're done, right? Which is a fascinating thing for a company, for any business to be able to look at, to be like, oh, we've only got 4 more decades in the tank, guys. But they really want to get to year 200. So what do? They've got this problem, right? So one of the main ways that the endowment fund is getting money is that people die and they leave their fortunes to the endowment fund, which then goes to enshrine Chautauqua forever and ever. But those are not renewable resources. Once those are gone, they're gone. And those are going to be gone soon. And so they realize that they need to find a different fundraising source outside the institution. So they hire a new president with this mandate. Go raise $10 million outside of the places where we already raise millions of dollars every year. Go find new sources of funding. And that's what he does. So he goes out, he goes to Washington, D.C. and gets some government partnerships. He starts working more on the lake and gets, some environmental partnerships. He gets a documentary made on PBS. He starts bringing some newer money fortunes there to start to, get involved. He starts to bring in some people of color. He himself is gay and he starts to really promote the LGBTQ culture there. And these are all necessary changes, right? To just keep up with the next few years of what they're going to have to contend with. Like, these are things that need to be done. He also presides over alcohol being there for the first time. In 2020, they opened their first bars. And of course, this is a huge... I know. The women's temperance movement was founded there. They have a drinking fountain that is the first drinking fountain, because the drinking fountain was created so that men didn't have to go into bars to ask for water and wouldn't be tempted to get alcohol. They have the first public drinking fountain on the grounds there. You can still drink out of it. It's a crazy place. So Michael Hill does all of these things that are necessary, right? They're absolutely necessary for the future of the institution over the next 30 years, no question. And yet, they're very unpopular. Not with everybody, but with the people who have been there a long time, whose power stems from the way things used to work, and whose sense of security stems from that. They don't like it. They don't like changes, and they don't like Chautauqua beholden to people who are not the original money givers, right? They don't like the influence being spread out. And so they tolerate him for a few years, they lambast him for a few years, and eventually he is ousted just a couple years ago. And now they've brought in somebody else to be more of a ameliorating influence, to sort of calm the people who have been there for 6 generations and assure them that everything is still going in the right direction. And so once again with Michael Hill, we see this like savior, scapegoat, saint cycle. And I think fully in 10, 15 years, they'll invite him back to speak about how he saved the institution. People will have forgotten, and they will remember what the contributions were that he gave. Some more Chautauqua photos. It's the old amphitheater. They had to redesign the amphitheater in the 1950s because people kept sliding down. They had no railings. It was just dirt ramps. And so the older people kept sliding down and hurting themselves. And so they had to redesign it for legal reasons. And it is still talked about as the biggest mistake in Chautauqua's history, almost 70 years ago. The houses look like this. Symphony. It's beautiful there. You should all come. Okay, so some themes here around Chautauqua. We have our steady location, right? They've never had to move. And because they've never had to move, they've really been able to invest in entrenching in that space and making sure that they have the resources that they need to make it this far. They have really strong explicit and implicit values there. The explicit values, they have 4 pillars, and they have a bunch of ceremonial stuff, and there's religious ceremonies every day. But the implicit values are what impresses me most, right? That's the thing that when I went there, I was like, I don't think I'm in a real place right now. Because people are just like walking slowly and saying hi to each other and helping each other across the street. There's no cars inside the grounds. It feels like you've been transported to another time. And that's a very special, difficult thing to maintain, especially in America. Where does the money come from is, I think, a big story of Chautauqua from its very beginning, right? From the rich industrialists who funded it, to the property owners who saved it, to now having to seek other outside sources of funding to save its future, and the tensions around who's funding it are very obvious. We talked about savior, scapegoat, saint, and conservatism and progressivism. I would say this stands out to me a lot whenever I go there, is there are groups of people there who have been going, they're 80 years old, they've been going since they were 0 years old. Their mother went, their grandmother went, their 4th, 5th generation. The house that they live in is 150 years old, you know, and they're like, hey, what's special about this place is that it does not change. And there's something compelling about that argument, and yet there's also something compelling about the argument when people are like, hey, I would love to come here, but I don't feel included or able to come here for certain cultural reasons. Wouldn't you like more people here? It's a tough question, and often the answer, if you get down to it with these people, is sometimes we only want people who are our kind of people here, right? Which sounds bad when we're talking about a 150-year-old organization, but like I hear the same conversation in our contemporary events where we're like, well, how do we scale? Well, we don't want just everybody in here, because the whole reason we came here to do this is because we're in-grouping and out-grouping. And if we just let everybody in here, suddenly it just becomes just like it is out there, which we all agree kind of sucks. And so this feeling of how to grow and how to change and how to let ourselves change is always present. All right, one more, last one. Okay, so Burning Man. I'm not going to talk about this one for very long. It doesn't quite make my list, right? It's not quite 50 years, 39 years, but I think it is useful to both talk about an example that you're more familiar with, and also I think it is valuable to look at one of these animals in its growth stage, right? It's early on, and so we can still see what is happening and what might happen to it in its future. Okay, so Burning Man is an 80,000 person music festival held in the desert. All of its infrastructure is temporary, right? You guys know this, but like it's kind of amazing that all of this is put up and taken down, even though it's in the same place. Permanent infrastructure is not available to them in that moment. There's art and theme camps and music and a radio station and a DMV. Something that I do find interesting is you see this emergent thing happen in a lot of these festivals, which is they predate many of the systems of formality. So like Chautauqua has a motor vehicle regulation before the DMV existed in America. And so they've had their own radio station and newspaper for many years, and you see Burning Man, having removed itself from common infrastructure, just ends up reinventing these systems. These are necessary human collaboration systems to just have people not get run over and to know when the rain is coming and things like that. So anyway, founded in 1986 on Baker Beach by Larry Harvey and Jerry James. They burned an 8-foot wooden effigy, and it kind of caught on. In 1989, it grows to 300 people, and it becomes like a real party, and the Cacophony Society writes it up in their newsletter, and that, of course, blows it up all the way. And by 1990, San Francisco's like, we cannot let this party keep happening on Baker Beach, and they actually ban fires on Baker Beach specifically to get rid of Burning Man. And so they move it. They move it out to the desert. They move it to the Black Rock Desert, where they have a little bit more freedom to do things. And it really rapidly expands from 300 to 8,000 over the next 5 years, right? Electric lighting comes in, amplified music comes in, theme camps come in right in its first decade, and it really starts to take hold. It gets bigger and bigger, as we know. In year 10, they establish the Department of Public Works and then start doing the city plan in a formal way. In year 13, they turn it formally into Black Rock City LLC, which is its first organizational reorg, which often happens around year 15, year 10 to 15. We often are like, oh, we started just doing this thing, whatever. And now like a lot of people are coming. We should probably like have a company and insurance and permits and stuff. And so you start to reorganize things. Over time, by the year 2000, the attendance has vastly grown to 25,000 people. And we get to year 20 in 2004, and Larry Harvey finally codifies the 10 principles of Burning Man, which is his attempt to make explicit values, right? Here he is, he's getting older. He's starting to realize that his time will eventually end, and probably the party will not. And part of him starts to be like, well, I wish that people would remember why and how we do this. And not just like how we get the porta potties out here, but like how we behave towards each other, right? Like what is that? And so he attempts to establish those principles along with the Burning Man Philosophical Society. A lot of you are more involved in that community than I am. I would say that the reports that I've received is the reception of those values is kind of mixed. People sometimes think that they are just explicit and not implicit enough, that people are not enacting them. This is not my scene, but like I'm sure people here have feelings about it. So it grows over, between 2005 and 2012, it grows from 25,000 to 75,000. Once again, we're seeing this precipitous climb in the population. And they end up having these increasing costs, right? Tickets are never gonna make it through, and so they start to lean harder and harder on the tech money that's always been there, right? This is the 2000s, 2010s. There's always been sort of the tech money at Burning Man, but it starts to become an essential part of how they work. And they reorganize the next year into their nonprofit structure so they can take on a lot of this sort of tech wealth support while it's still being tax deductible. So now, Larry Harvey dies in year 30, but he's already not been running the organization for a number of years at that point. And right now we're coming up on year 39, I think, or maybe year 40 this year. So I don't have the stats from this year. These are my notes from last year about Burning Man. If somebody knows stats from this year, please let me know. But so last year they didn't sell out for the first time in more than 10 years, and they ran a $20 million deficit on the event. Now, I just want to like postulate, for me, like I think when I hear that $20 million number in that year 40, I start to be like, oh, I've heard this story before in year 50, right? Like I've heard this story before about the financial crisis that's coming in a $20 million debt. I told this story just a few minutes ago. And so like in my opinion, like I think the next decade of Burning Man is going to run very similarly, right? They're going to hit a major bankruptcy level financial crisis and unsustainability, but enough people who are wealthy are invested emotionally and culturally that they're going to reorganize. They're going to consolidate the debt. They're going to establish a fund that allows those rich people to enshrine their desire to have Burning Man go on forever into a legal moneyed institution, and they'll create the Burning Man Endowment that will then be the shelter that allows Burning Man to close that gap every year that's not possible just through ticket sales and regular donations. I don't know. There we go. I don't know what path they're on. Like I know that they've done something recently in trying to acquire Fly Ranch. and try to get land that they don't have to move off of. I don't really know what the plan is for that. If there's anybody who can set me up with someone to talk to add that to my talk, I would love to understand a little bit what they see as their forward path is over the next 10 years, because I see them struggling with the same things that everybody is. This is my favorite picture of Burning Man in my research. This is a picture of Larry Harvey's office after he died. There's an article that a guy who knew him writes about almost every object in this photo and talks about the memorabilia and like what this flyer is for and what this book is about and stuff like that. It's a really interesting article. I just think this helps me understand there's always sort of two sides of the event, right? Like how we make it and then what it is when we made it. Okay, so let's wrap this up a little bit. So a couple things. Honorable mentions. These are festivals that I haven't talked about because they didn't make the cut for whatever reason. But that doesn't mean they're not worth talking about. And if you have more honorable mentions, please come up and give me more honorable mentions for my list. So Oregon Country Fair, established 1969. I hear it's awesome. The hardest thing about this one for me is they don't have a lot of their history online for me to research. It's hard for me to find out about the ins and outs of who was in charge when and what happened to them, whereas like Oberammergau's website has an intense amount of drama documented on it that I just can't even tell you. If anyone knows someone at Oregon Country Fair that would be interested in this kind of talk that they could set me up with an interview with, I would love to talk to somebody there to hear more about the oral tradition of their event. The International Juggling Association, IJA, established 1947. It's the biggest, most prominent juggling festival that happens every year. It's in a different city in America every year. And other juggling festivals have followed suit, including the European Juggling Convention. And it definitely creates a different feel to have it move to a new place and have a new set of logistics. Different people come, different people are in charge. Electric Daisy Carnival, EDC, established 1993, but really the guy who runs it now bought it in 97. It's a 500,000 person rave or something like that. It's supposed to be the biggest rave in the world. I looked it up. In year 15, they were bought out by Live Nation. And they are now 51% owned by Live Nation, which is one way to go on as an organization, for sure. And then Kumbh Mela. Is the person who told me about this here tonight? The guy at your house told me about this. This is a great one. So this is a festival in India where hundreds of thousands of people go in this sacred river and douse themselves in this river. It's really interesting. I haven't had this one. I just learned about last week, so I haven't done a ton of research about sort of its religiosity and things. But I put up these honorable mentions to just like be inclusive, right? The examples I gave tonight because I find them interesting and I was able to learn a lot about them to give you guys object lessons. But there's surely other festivals that have lasted for 50 or 100 years that I didn't get to mention. Okay, so there are these watershed moments that I notice in my research. This is where I make some sweeping generalizations that are not always true in practice, right? I'm just trying to get us to understand stuff that happens. So year 10 to 15 is often the problem with financial crisis and scaling. It's like, oh, we've been throwing this thing for a while, but it's not making enough money. We're gonna run out of money unless we change something. Do we bring more people in? Do we grow? Right? And that's almost always a discussion in year 10 to 15. Be like, do we grow? How do we grow? What does it mean to grow? What do we need to do to grow to that level? Does that make the money work? Year 15 to 25 is often the founder problem / solution and the start of the savior, scapegoat, saint cycle. So the founder is almost always the first person to save the organization, right? Because it did not exist before then. And they've put in a billion hours of work and money of their own or whatever it is. And they've made it what it is. But what happens is that at a certain point, your founder is no longer the appropriate person to run the thing the event has become, right? The event has changed. If it's made it this far, whatever it is has become something slightly different. And so at a certain point, that person needs to be shifted into a new role. Something interesting that I've noticed is like if you don't do it until year 25, it's hard for your event to get to year 35. Usually what's happened is if you haven't replaced your lead by year 25, that person has not done a good job, you use this great word, William, succession. That person has not done a good job setting somebody up to now take it over. Because it takes, if you're running an organization for 20 years, it takes 4 years to pass it off. You can't just be like, you're in charge now, right? There's all this political, social, economic stuff that you have to onboard somebody into. And so if you're not a leader who's trying to make your organization one that you are not involved in, then you're gonna hang on to that power as long as you can, and it might cripple your organization because by the time you're wrested from it, there might be no one to take over. Usually it's stronger if you can get rid of them in the more 10 to 15 route in a nice, like smooth way so you can start to pass it off really evenly. That cycle repeats though, again and again, right? Every 10 to 15 years, major changes have to be made, and so you have to bring in somebody new to make them, and they will inevitably become popular and then unpopular and then popular again. Year 25 to 35, you often find a venue or legal crisis. Usually you are sued, someone dies, the permits have changed, you're no longer allowed to do this event, there's a different government in charge. Things happen, forces from outside come in that force you to change dramatically. And then there's the year 50 bankruptcy, endowment, institution reorganization. Sometimes it's a little earlier. These are fuzzy, right? Like I'm making generalizations, like depending on your organization, your mileage may vary. But these are things that inevitably kind of come up in the organizational life cycle. The other thing to think about here is that over time, the world changes, not just your organization. This is something that like we learned in Oberammergau, right? They were like, we'll stay the same. And the world was like, no, you won't. Right? We've changed. And so you can't just count on being like, oh, I'm going to make my own plan for how the world's going to be. You have to remain sort of sensitive to what the outside world is really like. Okay, just to revisit our themes, oral tradition, origin stories, and folklores. All of these examples have strong local oral traditions about the events, about guys who founded it and saved it, about people who came and performed that time, about the year that the hurricane came or the army came or whatever it is. These oral traditions help new people feel like they are a part of something that is real and something that is lasting. These oral traditions and stories help integrate people into your culture. And so if you don't have a strong oral tradition, it's going to be hard to have a strong tradition. Values, explicit and implicit values, right? It's helpful to have explicit values, especially if you want to expand or have any kind of outward-facing presence. People need to come to the party and know what's up. But it's way more important that you have enactment of those values baked into your system. And this is a thing that I think should be talked about more. This could be its own talk. But like, you don't just say what your values are. Like, you have to do stuff where people do them. They have to do them with their bodies in a way that other people who aren't from there can look and see and be like, wow, I see that person doing something that shows me what that person and thus this community's values are. And when that person does that thing and then another person goes, good job, Jim, then you're like, oh, this community supports that kind of action. And no one has to tell me that. I saw it for myself. Regular cadence, dependable location. If it moves around, it becomes very different. If it moves around in time or space, it becomes different. It's the tradition that I've been on this spot for years and years. I mean, we all know it. We all feel it when it's a thing that we've experienced. But like, the dependability of us being able to plan our year around it is critical to that kind of ongoing, lasting influence. In-grouping and out-grouping. Again, I think it often has a negative connotation. I think it is absolutely necessary to have that for your festival. Not everyone gets to come. Not everyone wants to come. It's not for everyone, right? Understanding who it's for and who it's not for and making that clear is actually very important to your success of your festival, because you don't want people coming who are like, this sucks, and you're like, well, that's just not what we're doing. We're doing this other thing. Conservatism and progressivism. There's always going to want to be this element that's like, it was better before, don't change it. The changes that we've had to make are regrettable compromises that we've had to make towards time passing, but like, we should try to keep it the special thing that has gotten us this far as much as we can. And then progressivism, which is like, guys, yeah, it's nice that we got here, but like, that doesn't mean that we're done being here. And in fact, the thing that's kept us here is this incremental change that we've gone through for centuries that has kept us abreast of the wave. And if we stop changing now, we're done. I actually think this is one of the most important themes of the talk. What I have found is that it's really important that you have both of these elements in play. What happens is if you have either one in too much power, the pendulum starts to swing and your event will start to decay. If you have too much conservatism, it becomes this old stodgy thing that's meaningless. Nobody cares about it anymore. It's not what we do anymore. It's not our values anymore. No one comes. And your event dies. But if you swing it the other way and you change stuff too much and you allow too many other people and too much new stuff in, what happens is like, you're not the thing that you were anymore. You just become some other hardly strictly bluegrass or whatever, like you just become some other public event and you no longer have that magical core. The thing that works is having both sides in active, steady tension and discussion. And not conflict. Conflict will make it hard. Everyone gets all mad, everyone's all pissed, everyone's like, oh, why do I even do this for 200 years? But when you have people, like Oberammergau has reached in this current decade where it's like, oh, everyone agrees that changes need to be made, and the active, vital discussion of what is to be changed has reinvigorated that community. Whereas 30 years before, when it was like, there will be no changes, you saw the event already decaying because people were like, well, if there's no way to change it, what is the point of this? This doesn't represent me very well. And then founders, saviors, and scapegoats, right? Like, Who saves the organization? What do they have to do? And then what sins do we attribute to them and then get rid of them and then invite them back to teach 10 years later? These are the same questions as before. I don't need to answer these. I'm just going to say them aloud because these are things that you should ask yourself. So what are our values and how do we enact them? How do we make space for both tradition and progress? Where does the money come from? Who is in charge and who is this for? Do we need growth to sustain and what are the trade-offs? And who are we and who isn't us? I have one more question, which is sort of this meta question, which is like, what events should last 100 years? Not every event needs to follow this cycle. Not every business needs to be a legacy business. It is actually okay in many, many instances for your thing to last 10 years, 15 years, and then be done. Land it like a good bridge television show. You know what I mean? Be like, hey guys, we did it. High fives all around. Rather than letting the thing peter out and decay and sort of become moribund or disassociated, it's like maybe it's good to plan an exit strategy for your event unless you want to really approach it from the idea of some of these qualities, right? It's like, how am I going to make this last a century if that's what I want it to be? And that's my talk. Thank you guys so much for coming. If you want further reading, you can go to my website. I have the slides and I have a bunch of supporting articles on there that you can read more about these things. I encourage you to read more. Reading is good. You can also support us on Patreon. If you want to see more events like this, it is the way that we get to do them. This is the only way we get to do them is through the support of our patrons. Thank you if you are a patron and are here. It is critical to us being able to do things like this. And now we are going to pause for questions with the incredible Kaiser Naka.